There comes a moment in every boy's life when the world stops shielding him and begins to sculpt him. A moment when the laughter of childhood softens, when the noise of the world grows louder, and when the truth rises like a mirror in front of him. And in that mirror he sees not what he wanted to be, but what he must become. A king is not crowned by comfort. A king is carved by storms. A king is shaped in the quiet hours when no one is watching, when the heart trembles, when the breath shakes, when the soul whispers, "Stand, even now, stand." Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the teacher. Pain is the fire that melts away the boy so the man can emerge. Not hardened but refined, not arrogant but aware, not reckless but rooted. It is through facing what wounds him that he discovers what builds him. A boy becomes a king not when he lifts a sword, but when he lifts himself, when he refuses to be defined by what hurt him, when he learns that strength is not the absence of tears but the courage to let them fall. When he understands that true royalty comes from rising, not because the world said he should, but because his spirit refused to stay down. Every scar he carries becomes a medal. Every disappointment becomes a chapter. Every ache becomes a prophecy. And one day he looks back and realizes, he did not simply survive his pain, he used it. He honored it. He grew from it. And that is the day a king is born. Pain enters a boy's life long before he knows how to name it. It arrives quietly at first, sometimes through disappointment, sometimes through loneliness, sometimes through the shattering of something he believed would last forever. And because he is young, because the world has not yet taught him how to understand the storms inside him, he assumes pain is a punishment, a sign that he is weak, or a burden he must hide. But pain has never come to destroy him. It has come to awaken him. Pain is the first whisper that tells him, "Look deeper, stand taller. There is more inside you than you know." A king is born the moment a boy stops fearing pain and starts listening to what it is trying to teach him. Pain teaches in ways comfort never could. Comfort may soothe him, but it will never shape him. Comfort may protect him, but it will never prepare him. It is only through discomfort that he learns the reality of who he is, not the image he pretends to be, not the version the world wants to see, but the truth of his heart and spirit. When a boy is pushed to the edge of what he thinks he can bear, the mask falls away. He discovers the grit beneath his softness, the courage behind his hesitation, the fire under his doubt. Pain becomes the sculptor, chiseling away every illusion until all that remains is the foundation of a king, or real, unshakable. Pain is a mirror, too. In its reflection, the boy sees the wounds he avoided, the memories he buried, the truths he denied. He sees the patterns that keep repeating, the fears that whisper lies, the weaknesses he tried to outrun. Pain does not reveal these things to shame him, but to free him. For no king can rise while chained to the ghosts of yesterday. To face pain is to face himself, to confront every piece he once tried to hide. Only then can healing begin. Only then can he understand that pain is not here to make him smaller. It is here to make him whole. But pain is not just a mirror. It is also a map. It points to the places where he must grow, the places where he must learn, the places where he must rise. Every hurt signals a lesson. Every disappointment carries a message. Every heartbreak reveals something he was meant to see. Pain teaches him where his boundaries must be, where his standards must rise, where his purpose must strengthen. It teaches him the value of discernment, the importance of integrity, and the necessity of self-respect. Pain is a compass that guides him back to himself when the world has tried to pull him in 100 different directions. And pain teaches patience. A boy wants everything quickly, answers, victories, recognition, healing. But pain shows him that real growth requires time. Just as a seed must break before it blooms, a boy must allow the breaking within him to become the beginning of becoming. Pain slows him down long enough to understand that greatness is not rushed, transformation is not instant, and inner strength is not built overnight. A king rises not in a moment of glory, but through seasons of endurance. Pain teaches him that slow progress is still progress, that healing is not weakness, and that every step forward, no matter how small, is sacred. Most of all, pain teaches him empathy. A boy who has walked through fire does not mock another who is burning. He becomes gentle, not because he is fragile, but because he remembers what it felt like to hurt. He becomes compassionate, not because he is soft, but because he understands suffering. A true king is never crowned by his victories alone. He is crowned by the compassion that grows from his wounds. Pain turns a boy into a man who can lead not by force, but by understanding, not by dominance, but by wisdom, not by pride, but by heart. Pain becomes his teacher, his guide, and his silent partner in growth. And when he finally faces it, when he absorbs its lessons instead of resisting its presence, that is the moment when a king first begins to rise. There comes a time in every boy's life when he learns that the world has lied to him about strength. He was told that strength is silent, that pain must be swallowed, that emotions should be locked behind an iron door. He was taught that tears make him less, that softness makes him weak, that asking for help is a form of surrender. But sooner or later, life cracks open those teachings. It brings him to a moment where pretending becomes heavier than the truth, when he finally allows himself to feel, deeply, honestly, without apology. He discovers a form of power he never knew existed. Vulnerability is not the breaking of strength. It is the birthplace of it. For only the brave dare to reveal what is real beneath the armor they have worn for far too long. Vulnerability teaches a lesson no battlefield ever could, that revealing the truth of one's heart is far harder than hiding behind a mask. It requires him to strip away the layers he used to protect himself, the layers of indifference, silence, humor, anger, distraction. Those layers kept him safe, but they also kept him small. When he finally lets those walls fall, even if only for a moment, he stands face to face with his most authentic self. And authenticity is the soil where kings are born. A boy becomes a king the moment he accepts that strength does not come from closing his heart to the world, but from opening it, even when it trembles, even when it bleeds, even when he fears what others might see. When a boy lets himself be vulnerable, he learns to tell the truth, not the version he rehearsed, not the version shaped to please others, but the truth as it lives in his bones. He learns to say, "I am hurting," without shame. He learns to say, "I need support," without guilt. He learns to say, "This is who I am," without shrinking. The moment he stops performing and starts living is the moment he becomes powerful in a new way. Not the loud, boastful power that demands attention, but the quiet, undeniable power that stems from knowing oneself deeply. Vulnerability is a door only the courageous can walk through, for it requires him not just to be seen, but to be seen completely. Vulnerability also teaches him connection, real, soul-level connection. Boys who hide their feelings often believe they are alone in their struggles. They carry their pain like a secret burden, believing no one else could possibly understand. But the moment he opens up, he realizes that others carry their own storms, their own heartbreaks, their own battles hidden beneath their calm exteriors. Vulnerability dissolves the illusion of isolation and reveals a truth that changes him forever. He was never alone. And no king ever rises alone. True leadership grows from the ability to understand, relate, and connect. When he shares his truth, he does not weaken. He creates bridges where walls once stood. Most importantly, vulnerability teaches him resilience. Many believe that hiding emotions makes a person strong, but anything suppressed long enough eventually explodes. Vulnerability is the release that keeps him from becoming hardened, bitter, or numb. When he allows himself to feel, he also allows himself to heal. He learns that healing is not a sign of weakness but a sign of wisdom. It takes extraordinary courage to confront old wounds, to reopen old memories, to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. But every time he does, he becomes stronger, not because he avoids pain, but because he refuses to let pain command his life. Vulnerability is resilience in motion, the willingness to rise even while carrying the weight of what once broke him. In the end, vulnerability teaches him a truth that transforms his identity. That strength is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. The boy who once hid his heart now learns to honor it. The boy who once feared judgment now learns to trust his truth. The boy who once thought tears were a symbol of weakness now understands they are a symbol of being alive. And through this understanding, he evolves, he widens, he deepens. He becomes the kind of man whose strength is rooted not in the walls he builds, but in the courage he holds within. This is the strength that cannot be shaken, the strength that cannot be stolen, the strength that crowns him from the inside out. Through vulnerability, the boy steps into his power, and it is there, in that sacred unveiling, that the king within him first begins to rise. Responsibility is the threshold every boy must cross if he hopes to rise into the fullness of who he was meant to be. There comes a moment when he realizes that his life is not shaped solely by what has happened to him, but by how he chooses to respond. He begins to understand that blame may feel comforting, but it keeps him small. Excuses may feel protective, but they keep him stuck. When he stops pointing outward and begins looking inward, something powerful shifts. His spirit straightens, his voice strengthens, and his sense of direction becomes clearer than ever. Responsibility is not a burden, it is a coronation. It is the moment he takes authority over his own life, the moment the throne within him begins to form. Taking responsibility does not mean he suddenly has all the answers. It means he learns to stop running from the questions. It means he stops waiting for someone else to fix what he himself must face. It means he recognizes that every decision, every mistake, every victory carries a weight, and he chooses to carry that weight with honor. Responsibility is the quiet courage to say, the outcome of my life is tied to my actions, not my circumstances. A boy who accepts this truth becomes grounded. He stops drifting with the winds of emotion or the expectations of others. He becomes anchored, rooted, steady, qualities no crown can grant, but every king must possess. Responsibility also teaches him maturity. Many boys grow taller, but not all grow wiser. Many age, but not all evolve. Responsibility is the catalyst that transforms age into maturity, intention into integrity. It teaches him discipline, the inner command that guides him when no one is watching. It teaches him consistency, not perfection, but the willingness to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep pushing forward even when progress feels invisible. It teaches him accountability, the willingness to admit when he is wrong, to reflect on his actions, and to correct his course with humility instead of pride. A boy becomes a man not because time passed, but because he chose to grow. And responsibility reveals another truth. Life will not hand him what he wants simply because he desires it. Dreams do not manifest through wishing. They require effort, sacrifice, and commitment. The boy learns that every dream asks him a question. How much of your comfort are you willing to let go of? How much discipline are you willing to embrace? How much consistency can you sustain when no one is clapping for you? Responsibility demands that he rise to meet the weight of his own potential. It challenges him to stop treating greatness as a destination and start treating it as a daily choice. That shift, from waiting to working, from hoping to building, is the turning point where kings are forged. Responsibility also teaches him emotional authority, the power to control his reactions instead of letting his reactions control him. A boy may lash out when hurt, shut down when overwhelmed, or withdraw when afraid. But responsibility calls him to become the guardian of his own emotional landscape. It teaches him to pause before speaking, to reflect before acting, to understand before accusing. It teaches him that emotional intelligence is not just a skill, it is a form of power. True kings do not lead with rage or pride. They lead with clarity, awareness, and restraint. When a boy learns to govern himself, he becomes ready to govern his life. Finally, responsibility teaches him legacy. He begins to understand that his life is not just about how he feels today, but about who he becomes over years, seasons, and lifetimes. Every choice he makes becomes a brick in the foundation of the man he will stand as. Responsibility shapes his identity, his relationships, his dreams, and his destiny. It teaches him that leadership is not about commanding others, but about mastering oneself. And when he takes responsibility not out of fear, guilt, or pressure, but out of pride, intention, and purpose, he steps into the true lineage of greatness. In that moment, the boy rises. In that moment, the man awakens. And silently, steadily, unmistakably, the king within him begins to ascend. Scars appear in a boy's life long before he understands their meaning. Some form on the skin, visible and easy to explain. Others live silently beneath the surface, etched into memory, wrapped around old fears, shadowed within the heart. These are the scars no one sees, but they are the ones that shape him most profoundly. For years he may hide them, ashamed of what they represent. He may believe they are evidence of failure, weakness, or inadequacy. But over time, life reveals a truth that shifts everything. Scars do not speak of defeat. They speak of survival. They are not signs of what broke him, but signs of what he endured and overcame. The very marks he once resented become the proof that he lived through what others may never fully understand, and yet he is still standing. A scar is not merely a memory, it is a testimony. It testifies that he walked through a fire and did not disappear in its flames. It testifies that he bent but did not break, that he fell but did not remain fallen. When he begins to see his scars through this lens, they no longer feel like shadows on his story. They become the pages that make his story worth reading. A boy who learns to honor his scars learns to honor the journey that shaped him. He grows into someone who no longer hides from his past but draws wisdom from it, someone who understands that pain transformed is power earned. His scars become his own kind of royalty, unseen by many, misunderstood by some, but deeply meaningful to him. Scars also teach him perspective. They remind him that life did not go easy on him, but he did not go easy on life either. They show him the difference between being fragile and being human. Every scar reveals a lesson, a turning point, a moment when the boy was tested. Some scars come from betrayal, teaching him who deserves access to his heart. Others come from disappointment, teaching him not to lose himself chasing what does not love him back. Others come from loss, teaching him the depth of his capacity to feel, love, grieve, and rise again. These scars become a map, a roadmap of where he has been and a guide toward where he is meant to go. They remind him not to fear pain because he has met pain before and he has outlived it every time. And as he grows, he begins to see that everyone carries scars, though some hide theirs better than others. This understanding softens him. It expands him. It teaches him compassion, the kind of compassion that cannot be taught by books, teachers, or lectures, but only by lived experience. His scars give him eyes to see the quiet battles in others, the unspoken pain behind their defenses, the stories behind their silence. He becomes gentle not from weakness but from wisdom. He stops judging people for their wounds and instead honors the strength it took for them to survive. A boy with no scars may seem perfect, but a boy with scars has known the world and still chooses to walk through it with an open heart. That choice is the beginning of greatness. Scars also teach him identity. For a long time he may have tried to fit into molds that were too small for him, images too shallow, expectations too rigid. But scars make him distinct, authentic, incomparable. They remove the need to pretend, to blend in, to be anything other than who he genuinely is. Each scar becomes a reminder that he has earned his place in the world, not by being flawless, but by being resilient. He begins to take pride in the battles he fought, in the storms he survived, in the nights he endured. He begins to see that his scars are not random wounds. They are the markings of a warrior, the carvings that shape a king. Where others see damage, he sees destiny. Finally, scars teach him acceptance, not the passive kind that settles for less, but the powerful kind that embraces the truth of who he has become. He learns that he does not need to erase the past to build the future. He does not need to hide his broken pieces to be worthy of love, respect, or leadership. He understands that strength is not found in the absence of wounds, but in the courage to rise with them, walk with them, grow with them. When he finally accepts his scars, not as flaws, but as foundations, something extraordinary happens. He begins to stand taller. He begins to breathe deeper. He begins to recognize his own worth. And without ceremony, without applause, without any external crown, he ascends within himself. His scars become his armor, his wisdom, his truth, and through them the boy moves closer to the king he is destined to become. Every boy falls long before he learns how to rise. Life introduces him to the ground early, through disappointment, through failure, through heartbreak, through moments when he feels smaller than his own shadow. The fall is not what wounds him most. The silence after the fall is. It is in the stillness, the confusion, the heaviness of defeat where he wonders if rising is even possible. For a while he may stay there, staring at the dust beneath him, questioning his strength, questioning his purpose, questioning his place in the world. But the truth is that every fall carries within it an invitation, a quiet but powerful whisper urging him to rise again. Growth does not happen in the fall. Growth happens the moment he decides the fall will not be the end of his story. There is a sacred transformation that occurs after a fall, but only for those who choose to stand again. Rising is not simply getting back on his feet. It is choosing courage over comfort, resilience over resignation, and determination over despair. When a boy rises after a hard fall, he does not rise as the same person who fell. Something inside him sharpens. Something in him wakes up. He becomes more aware of who he is, more conscious of his strength, more grounded in his identity. The fall may have shaken him, but the rise fortifies him. It teaches him that setbacks are not signs of failure, but signs of movement, proof that he is stretching, learning, and evolving. Every rise carves deeper wisdom into his spirit, and adds another layer of strength to the king he is becoming. Falling teaches him humility. Rising teaches him power. Both are necessary. A boy who has never fallen may think he is strong, but he does not know the depth of his strength. He does not know how much he can endure, how deeply he can dig, or how fiercely he can fight. It is only after a fall that he discovers what he is made of. He learns that resilience is not built in comfort but in challenge. He learns that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move despite fear. He learns that inner strength is not inherited. It is earned through every struggle he refuses to let break him. When he rises, he learns that his worth was never tied to staying perfect. It was tied to staying persistent. Every fall also teaches him clarity. When life knocks him down, it has a way of stripping away the distractions, illusions, and false beliefs he once clung to. He begins to see what truly matters. He sees who stood by him and who disappeared. He sees which dreams are genuine and which were shaped by fear or pressure. He sees which parts of himself need healing, which habits need changing, and which truths need honoring. The fall becomes a lens through which he views life more clearly. It refines him. It resets him. It points him toward a version of himself he could not have discovered while standing comfortably. The ground may feel painful, but sometimes the ground is exactly where transformation begins. And with every rise, he grows more patient, more strategic, more disciplined. He learns that growth is not linear. Some days he will soar. Some days he will stumble. Some days he will rise with fire in his heart. Other days he will rise slowly, quietly, trembling, but still rising. He learns that standing back up does not require perfection, only intention. It does not require confidence, only commitment. It does not require strength, only the willingness to try. And with each attempt, with each rise, with each step forward, he becomes more certain of his own resilience. He realizes that falling is not a sign that he is unworthy of his dreams. It is a sign that he is walking towards something greater than he has ever known. Ultimately, every rise brings him closer to the king within. A king is not defined by how often he falls. He is defined by how faithfully he rises. He does not rise because the world expects him to. He rises because his soul refuses to surrender. He rises because he knows his purpose is greater than his pain. He rises because the path he is on demands endurance, not ease. With every fall he gains wisdom. With every rise he gains power. With every setback he gains direction. And through this relentless cycle of falling and rising, breaking and rebuilding, doubting and discovering, he becomes the kind of man whose strength is undeniable, whose courage is unshakable, and whose spirit is unbreakable. A king is not born in moments of triumph, but in moments when he chooses to stand up again, even when standing feels impossible. Before a boy can lead others, he must first learn to lead himself, a lesson life teaches slowly, intentionally, and often painfully. Self-leadership is not about controlling everything around him. It is about mastering the landscape within him. A boy can conquer mountains, win battles, achieve dreams, and still feel lost if he has not learned how to take command of his thoughts, his fears, and his impulses. The moment he begins to guide himself, not through force, but through awareness, is the moment something divine awakens inside him. Leadership begins the day he stops being driven by his emotions and starts being guided by his value. The strength he once searched for in the world begins to grow from within, and the boy realizes that true power is not found in authority over others, but in authority over himself. Self-leadership requires discipline, not the cold, rigid discipline he fears, but the loving, empowering discipline that shapes him into someone he can rely on. It teaches him to create boundaries that protect his peace, priorities that ground his purpose, and habits that strengthen his character. There will be days he feels tired, days he feels defeated, days he feels unsure. But discipline teaches him consistency even when motivation fades. It teaches him to follow through on the promises he makes to himself. Promises about growth, health, honesty, self-respect, and dreams that matter. A boy becomes trustworthy the moment he learns to trust himself, and discipline is the bridge between who he is and who he has the potential to become. Leading himself also means learning to quiet the noise around him. The world is loud with opinions, expectations, doubts, and judgments. If he listens to every voice, he will lose the sound of his own. Self-leadership teaches him discernment. It teaches him to filter the world's noise and tune into his inner compass, the silent guidance that comes through intuition, self-knowledge, and truth. This inner compass helps him navigate difficult decisions, toxic environments, and uncertain paths. When he learns to trust this inner voice, he becomes stronger, clearer, and more grounded. He no longer drifts with the tides of external influence. He moves with purpose, guided by an internal certainty that cannot be shaken. Self-leadership also teaches him responsibility for his energy. He learns to recognize when he is tired and needs rest, when he is overwhelmed and needs space, when he is carrying emotions that are not his to carry. He learns to protect his spirit with the same dedication he protects his goals. He discovers that saying no is not selfish. It is strategic. Letting go is not weakness. It is wisdom. Walking away is not quitting. It is choosing alignment. The boy who once poured himself out for everyone begins to pour into himself, not out of arrogance, but out of understanding. He realizes that he cannot lead others from an empty heart. He must first be whole within himself. That shift is the birth of emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is the foundation of every great leader. Most importantly, self-leadership teaches him integrity. It calls him to be honest even when lies would be easier, to be kind even when anger feels justified, to be steady even when fear tries to shake him. It teaches him to act in alignment with his values even when no one is watching. It shows him that a real king is not defined by how loudly he demands respect, but by how quietly he lives in truth. The boy learns that leadership is not a position, it is a posture. It is the daily choice to rise above ego, to act with intention, to move with humility, and to let character speak louder than words. Through integrity, he becomes dependable, steadfast, and worthy of trust. Eventually, through the slow, steady practice of guiding himself, the boy becomes someone different. He becomes someone grounded in self-awareness, strengthened by discipline, guided by intuition, protected by boundaries, lifted by integrity, and fueled by purpose. And it is in that transformation, not in applause, not in recognition, not in crowns or titles, that a king is quietly born. Leading himself teaches him how to lead his life, and leading his life teaches him how to lead the world. His greatness begins not with commanding others, but with commanding the courage to shape himself. This is where true royalty rises, in the heart of a boy who chooses to lead from within. There comes a moment in every life when the world grows quiet, when the noise of expectation, comparison, and doubt finally fades enough for a man to hear the truth inside him. And that truth is simple. He was never meant to stay a boy hiding from his wounds. He was meant to rise, meant to grow, meant to transform every bruise into wisdom and every scar into strength. The journey was never about avoiding pain, but about learning to walk through it with courage, clarity, and grace. A king is not crowned by gold or applause. He is crowned by the choices he makes in the dark, when no one is watching, when everything feels heavy, when he must rely on a strength he cannot yet see. His coronation happens quietly inside him, the moment he chooses growth over blame, healing over hiding, responsibility over excuses, and truth over pretense. No throne can give him this, no title can replace it. This is the kind of royalty earned through resilience, not inherited by birth. And so, as he stands at the crossroads of who he was and who he is becoming, he realizes that facing his pain was not the end of him. It was the beginning of clarity, the beginning of confidence, the beginning of a new identity built not on fear but on purpose. He understands now that every challenge shaped him, every loss taught him, every heartbreak expanded him. He is no longer defined by the battles he endured, but by the strength he carries because of them. He steps forward differently now, steadier, wiser, more rooted in himself. He speaks with a voice that no longer trembles trying to prove anything to the world. He looks at his reflection and sees not the brokenness of his past, but the becoming of his future. The boy within him is not gone. He has simply evolved into something greater, something stronger, something more whole. He has risen into the kind of man who leads with compassion, stands with integrity, and walks with purpose. And as he moves into the next chapter of his life, he understands something profound. The pain that once tried to silence him has become the very force that elevated him. The storms that once threatened to drown him taught him how to navigate the waters. The darkness that once frightened him taught him how to find his own light. He realizes now that kings are not born in comfort. They are born in the fire. They rise not despite the pain, but because of it. So let him walk forward with his head held high, his spirit unshaken, and his heart wide open. For he is no longer the boy who ran from his wounds. He has faced them, felt them, learned from them, and risen beyond them. And in doing so, he has stepped into the quiet, powerful truth of his existence. A king is born, not in glory, not in perfection, but in the brave, unwavering decision to rise.